his right hand. While Hamer struggled with McMeans, another gunman, H.E. Phillips, advanced toward the scuffle with a shotgun. From the car, Gladys screamed out a warning. Then she reached over and got that ever-present automatic of hers and opened fire. Phillips ducks behind a parked car, tried to advance again, then once more was driven back to cover by Gladys. He swung his shotgun toward Gladys, but quickly ducked again as she continued to fire. When she finally ran empty, Phillips hurried across the street just as McMeans twisted free from Hamer's one-arm grip. Phillips loosed a shotgun blast at Hamer. He's on the run now. Fired that shotgun and buckshot tore off his hat brim. He thought he'd blown his head apart. "I got him! I got him!" he shouted. Hamer sank to his knees, then began shaking his head from the ear-splitting blast of that shotgun. Realizing Hamer was not dead, McMeans produced another gun. Now Hamer wore his favorite gun, a single-action Colt 45 that he nicknamed Old Lucky, on his left hip. Remember, he's left-handed. But that arm was disabled. On his right hip, he was a two-gun man, was strapped a .44 caliber Smith & Wesson. And before McMeans could fire, he pulled that gun out and shot him in the heart with his offhand, with his right hand. Phillips bolted for safety and he outran everybody. This fight took place on the southeast corner of Sweetwater Square. A new courthouse was under construction, so the county had taken rooms in the big Blue Bonnet Hotel nearby. Well, a grand jury was in session at the Blue Bonnet. And when gunfire broke out, they looked out the windows and watched the fight. Recognizing the famous Texas Ranger Frank Hamer, the grand jury, still in session after all, they no-billed Hamer, and that ended the legal procedures. There was no testimony for Billy to steal. When Frank Hamer was well enough to travel, he and Gladys and the girls journeyed to California to recuperate at the vacation home that Billy Johnson had built near Los Angeles, near Hollywood. There, the famous Western movie star, Tom Mix, came out to meet a real gunfighting lawman. There's a picture of the two of them out in L.A. And there, Frank Hamer Jr. soon was born, back in West Texas. The Sims family had lost their oldest son, and now their oldest son-in-law. Gladys and Sidney Johnson had been cleared through the legal wizardry of Cullen Higgins, and Frank Hamer was vacationing in California. Hamer, earlier, as I said, had thwarted an assassination attempt on Billy Johnson. Man, they'd tried to get everybody, all to no avail. So, now, Cullen Higgins was targeted for a revenge killing. Cullen was scheduled for legal business when the Kent County District Court met and the county seat convened on Monday, March 18th, 1918. Now on Sunday, remember I told you, devoutly religious, he taught his boys' Sunday school class at Snyder's First Methodist Church. Among the founders had been Billy and Nanny Johnson. Then he attended the morning service, and then at home he bade his wife and little boy farewell, and he headed for Claremont, 35 miles eastward. Now Claremont, the seat of Kent County, is today a ghost town. But in 1918, there were 200 residents, a school and stores, a two-story hotel, and a courthouse and rock jail. Only the empty courthouse and the rock jail are still there today. Cullen, church-going man, he attended revival services that night in Claremont's only church. Then he retired to the Claremont Hotel, where he sat in the lobby with the district judge and the court reporter. Now, while these men talked, a three-man hit team approached the hotel. Cy Bostic, Bob Higdon, Will Luman. Luman was scheduled to be tried for murder with Cullen Higgins as a special prosecutor. He had some motivation beyond a hitman fee. Bostic leveled a double-barrel shotgun through an open window and blasted Higgins in the back. The trio of assassins fled into the darkness, mounted their waiting horses, and then galloped to the west. Cullen Higgins was taken to a medical facility in Spur, 20 miles to the north. Doctor extracted 5 buckshot, but he couldn't get at 2 of them. So internal surgery was performed on Monday, but with his wife at his side, about midday on Tuesday, Cullen died. Judge Higgins was only 42. 2,000 friends from across sparsely settled West Texas came to his funeral, the largest they had ever seen to that point. At the same hour that Judge Higgins died, Cy Bostic was arrested by 2 Texas Rangers at a ranch north of Post City. He was jailed at Post, but there was so much talk of lynching that the 2 Texas Rangers on Wednesday, the next day, took Bostic by train to quote, an unknown destination. Late Wednesday night, They got off the train in Sweetwater, spirited their prisoner across town to the three-story brick jail there. Nobody knew they were in town, middle of the night. No other prisoners were on that low-ceilinged top floor. Interrogation methods, let me tell you, were pretty rough a century ago. In his lonely cell, Bostic told officers the identity of his accomplices, the location of the murder weapon, and anything else they wanted to know. On Thursday, the next day, a posse rode out of Sweetwater to a stock tank west of Claremont. Two members of the posse were Frank and Nath Terry, who were law officers and first cousins of Judge Higgins. Nath Terry dove into the stock tank, soon emerged with the shotgun. That same day, Bob Higdon and Will Luman, the other assassins, were arrested. On Friday morning, the next day, since he had told them everything he could be useful, Cy Bostic was found dead in his cell. His belt was tightened around his neck and fastened to a bar on the window by a torn strip of bed sheet. Except those windows were just walk-up windows. Remember, it was low ceiling, no height at all in there. A pocket handkerchief was stuffed into his mouth. His neck was not broken. He was leaning against the wall with his bare feet touching the floor. An inquest conducted by a cooperative justice of the peace concluded that the prisoner's death, quote, was self-committed by hanging. The Sweetwater Daily Republic headlined the next day, "Hangs Self in Cell," speculating that Bostic had, quote, pulled the strap taut enough to induce death by choking. Can you imagine strangling yourself to just keep leaning on the thing, just keep leaning on it? Rumors quickly circulated that Bostic was killed in his cell as retribution by members of the law enforcement fraternity for the assassination of a widely respected judge, and that another member of the fraternity, that Justice of the Peace, provided the official stamp of suicide as a cover-up. In any event, the deceased prisoner proved to be the sacrificial lamb for justice. After numerous legal delays, neither Higdon nor Luman was ever tried for the murder of Cullen Higgins. Now, Luman was sentenced to 5 years for manslaughter in another case for killing a man who had killed Will's brother-in-law. And these two killings were related to the feud, one of those subplots I told you I didn't have time to talk about, except to say this. This was the case in which Cullen Higgins was supposed to be special prosecutor. The death of Cy Bostic while in custody sent a powerful message from law enforcement to feudists. It's time to stop the violence. Feudists would continue feuding at their own peril. It would be very dangerous to be a hired gun. So the Johnson-Sims feud fizzled out in part because of the loss of both patriarchs. Billy Johnson's prestige and reputation were in tatters. He was sued by the widow of Ed Sims. There had been years of intense stress, and now he cracked. Billy Johnson suffered a nervous breakdown, was never the same physically or mentally. Dave Sims died of cancer early in 1919 at the age of 61. Laura Bell Sims, his wife, remained bitter the rest of her long life. She lived into her 90s, and she had little to do with Ed's daughters or their children. Those were her granddaughters and great-grandchildren. Sidney Johnson escaped legal consequences for murdering Ed, and he proved to be a good rancher. But he drank heavily. He was an ugly drunk. He had a mean disposition. He divorced, he alienated family and friends, and when he drunkenly walked in front of a car in San Antonio at the age of 69, there wasn't a whole lot of grief. Finally, Gladys Johnson-Sims Hamer. She had met the love of her life. Big Frank Hamer called her Bunch, short for Honey Bunch. She idolized and adored him. He signed his letters, HB, Honey Bunch. Gladys and Frank raised 4 children, Trix, Beverly, and their sons, Frank Jr. and Billy. Well liked by everybody, Billy Hamer joined the Marines during World War II and was killed on Iwo Jima. Frank Hamer became nationally famous after he chased down Bonnie and Clyde in 1934. He died 21 years later. Gladys stayed in their Austin home the rest of her long life. She always carried that automatic with her, even room to room, after she was wooded. One night, she was sitting in her living room reading a novel, and she glanced up, and a peeping Tom, a would-be intruder, somebody was looking at her through the window. She reached over and got that automatic and fired a round through there, and he wasn't seen anymore. One of her grandsons told me, when we were children and stayed with Granny, we felt very safe. I bet they did. Granny Gladys died in 1976 at 85, but 60 years earlier, as a fiery young woman, Gladys was the central figure in a murderous conflict between two pioneer ranching families, and they produced the last blood feud in Texas. All of that started here, it ended out there. And maybe it's the last old-fashioned Wild West feud anywhere in the West. Well, I thank you very kindly for your attention.